The average Australian woman retires with $82,000 less in superannuation than the average Australian man. That's not a projection or a worst-case scenario. That's the documented median gap as of 2024, based on data from the Australian Bureau of Statistics and Analysis by Industry Super Australia. For a woman retiring at 67, that $82,000 gap translates directly into reduced income throughout retirement. At a modest 4% annual drawdown rate, which is conservative for most retirement strategies, that missing $82,000 represents $3,280 less income every year for the entire duration of retirement. Over a 25-year retirement, which is increasingly common as life expectancy extends, that single gap compounds into more than $82,000 in lost income when you account for the investment returns that money would have generated had it been there. We are on a mission to reach 10,000 subscribers to build a community that is aware of these financial shifts. If that resonates with you, hit subscribe. What I find most concerning about this gap isn't just its size, though $82,000 is substantial. It's that the gap is structural, built into the design of how superannuation interacts with women's work patterns, caring responsibilities, and life circumstances. This isn't about women making poor investment choices or failing to engage with their super-IVE. The gap exists even when women do everything right, and it persists across education levels, occupations, and income brackets. Understanding why this gap exists requires looking at the mechanics of how superannuation accumulates and the systematic differences in how men and women experience the Australian workforce. The fundamental mechanism of superannuation is straightforward. Employers pay a percentage of your ordinary time earnings into your super fund. That money is invested, generates returns over time, and compounds until you retire and start drawing it down. The amount you retire with is determined by three factors: how much goes in through contributions, how long it compounds, and what investment returns it generates. The gender gap emerges primarily from the first two factors. Women, on average, have lower contributions and more interrupted compounding periods than men. The contribution gap starts with the pay gap. The latest data from the Workplace Gender Equality Agency shows that as of 2024, the national gender pay gap sits at approximately 12%. This means that for every dollar the average man earns, the average woman earns 88 cents. Since superannuation is calculated as a percentage of earnings, that 12% pay gap translates directly into a 12% super contribution gap. A man earning $80,000 receives $9,600 in annual super contributions at the 12% rate. A woman earning the gender gap-adjusted equivalent of approximately $70,400 receives $8,448 in annual super contributions. Over a 40-year working life, assuming no other factors, that annual difference of $1,152 compounds substantially, but the pay gap itself is only part of the story. What amplifies the superannuation gap, far beyond the pay gap, is interrupted workforce participation. The primary driver of this interruption is caring responsibilities. Australian Bureau of Statistics data consistently shows that women are significantly more likely than men to take time out of the workforce or reduce their working hours to care for children, aging parents, or other family members. When a woman takes maternity leave, particularly unpaid maternity leave, she's not receiving salary and therefore not receiving superannuation contributions for that period. The Paid Parental Leave Scheme provides 20 weeks of government-funded parental leave pay at the national minimum wage, but superannuation is not paid on this government payment. This was a significant gap in the system. However, from July 1, 2025, superannuation will be paid on government-funded paid parental leave at the rate of 12%, addressing what has been a long-standing inequity. This change means that from mid-2025 onwards, parents taking government-funded parental leave will have super contributions made on those payments. This is a positive development that will help reduce the superannuation gap for future cohorts, but it doesn't retroactively help women who have already taken parental leave in previous years, and it only covers the 20-week government-funded period. Many women take additional unpaid leave beyond those 20 weeks, and during those periods no super is contributed unless they make voluntary contributions themselves, which relatively few can afford to do when household income has already been reduced. The impact of even a single year out of the workforce is substantial. when you account for lost compounding. If a 30-year-old woman takes 1 year of unpaid leave and therefore misses 1 year of super contributions that would have been approximately $10,000, that's not just $10,000 missing from her retirement balance. It's $10,000 that had 37 years to compound before she retires at 67 at a 6% average annual return, which is modest for balanced super funds over long periods. That $10,000 would have grown to approximately $81,000 by retirement. A single year of missed contributions costs not $10,000 in retirement savings, but $81,000 when women take multiple periods of leave, which is common for those who have more than one child, or who take extended time to care for young children. The compounding effect multiplies. 2 years of missed contributions at age 30 and again at age 33 means roughly $20,000 in nominal contributions missed, but close to $160,000 missing from the retirement balance when compounding is factored in. Beyond complete workforce exits for parenting, there's the part-time work effect. After returning from maternity leave, many women return to part-time rather than full-time hours. Australian Bureau of Statistics labour force data shows that women are substantially more likely to work part-time than men, and this disparity is most pronounced among women aged 25-44, which corresponds to the typical child-rearing years. In 2023, approximately 44% of employed women worked part-time compared to about 16% of employed men. Part-time work means lower absolute earnings and therefore lower absolute super contributions, even though the percentage rate is the same. A woman working 3 days per week, earning $48,000 annually, receives $5,760 in super contributions. A man working full-time earning $80,000 receives $9,600. Over decades, this difference accumulates substantially. Even if the woman later returns to full-time work, she's lost years of higher contributions and the compounding those would have generated. There's also occupational segregation. Women are disproportionately represented in lower-paying industries and occupations. Teaching, nursing, aged care, retail, and hospitality employ high percentages of women, and many of these sectors have lower average wages than male-dominated industries like mining, construction, engineering, and technology. This isn't about women choosing lower-paying work arbitrarily, it's about systematic differences in how different types of work are valued and compensated in the Australian economy, but the effect on superannuation is the same. Lower wages mean lower super contributions, regardless of the reason for the wage difference. Casualisation affects women more than men. Casual workers have historically faced challenges with superannuation compliance, with some employers failing to pay super correctly or on time. While regulatory changes have improved this, women's overrepresentation in casual work, particularly in retail and hospitality, means they've been disproportionately affected by these compliance failures. Even when super is paid correctly, casual workers often have multiple small super accounts from different employers, which can result in multiple sets of fees, eroding balances unless accounts are consolidated. Another factor is the impact of relationship breakdowns. Divorce or separation typically occurs after years of marriage, during which superannuation has been accumulating. While superannuation is considered property and is subject to division in family law property settlements, the reality is that in many cases women exit relationships with lower super balances than men, particularly if they were the primary caregiver who worked part-time or took career breaks during the relationship. Even with equitable property settlements, if the woman has already spent years accumulating less super due to part-time work or career breaks, and then the relationship ends in her 40s or 50s, she has fewer working years remaining to rebuild her balance. The pay gap itself, which drives the initial contribution gap, has multiple causes. The Workplace Gender Equality Agency identifies several key factors. There's occupational segregation, as mentioned. There's the impact of caring responsibilities on career progression, where time out of the workforce or working part-time can result in missing out on promotions, skill development, and career advancement opportunities that would lead to higher salaries. There's evidence of direct discrimination in some cases, where women are paid less than men for the same work, though this is illegal and appears to be declining. There's also negotiation gap research suggesting that women on average negotiate less aggressively for starting salaries and raises, though this is a contentious area with complex cultural and structural factors. What all of these factors create collectively is a superannuation system that, while gender-neutral in its design, interacts with gendered patterns of work and life in ways that systematically disadvantage women. The superannuation system doesn't inherently discriminate against women. The contribution rate is the same regardless of gender. The investment options are the same. The tax treatment is the same. But because the system is purely earnings-based and women have lower average earnings and more interrupted earnings due to caring responsibilities, the outcomes are systematically unequal. This creates what economists call a structurally disadvantaged position. Even highly educated, professionally successful women face the super gap. A female doctor who takes 3 years out of the workforce for parenting and then returns part-time for 5 years before resuming full-time work will have substantially lower superannuation at retirement than a male doctor who worked continuously full-time, even though both have the same qualifications, same earning potential per hour worked, and same professional status. The recent change to pay superannuation on government-funded paid parental leave from July 2025 is significant because it recognizes that the previous system was contributing to the gender super gap by treating parenting, which is socially necessary work that benefits society, as a period where no retirement savings should accrue. Paying super on paid parental leave acknowledges that the person on leave is performing valuable work, caring for the next generation, and shouldn't be financially penalized in retirement for doing so. However, this change only addresses part of the problem. It covers 20 weeks, soon to be 26 weeks when the scheme expands, but many parents, predominantly mothers, take longer periods of leave. It doesn't address the part-time work gap that follows return to work. It doesn't address the career progression impact that results in lower wages and therefore lower super contributions even when back full-time. And it doesn't help women who took parental leave before July 2025 and therefore missed years of contributions during leave periods. Some policy proposals have suggested broader reforms. There have been discussions about the government making superannuation contributions during all periods of parental leave, not just government-funded paid parental leave, though this would be expensive and complex to implement. There have been proposals for superannuation to be paid on all forms of family and caring leave, recognizing that caring responsibilities extend beyond just early childhood parenting to include caring for disabled children, aging parents, and other family members. There have also been suggestions for allowing carers to make catch-up contributions later in their careers at concessional tax rates to make up for years of missed contributions, though this would only benefit those who have spare income later to make such contributions, which may not be the case for many women. Some proposals have suggested gender-based adjustments to contribution rates, where women would receive higher percentage contributions than men to offset the structural disadvantages, though this would be politically contentious and legally complex. What remains clear from the data is that without structural intervention, the super gap will persist. The Association of Superannuation Funds of Australia regularly publishes retirement standards showing how much super is needed for a comfortable or modest retirement. Their 2024 figures suggest a single person needs approximately $595,000 for a comfortable retirement, and a couple needs approximately $690,000 combined. The median super balance for women at retirement consistently falls below these thresholds, while men's median balances are closer to or above them. This has direct consequences for retirement living standards. Women are more likely to retire with insufficient superannuation to fund a comfortable retirement and are therefore more reliant on the age pension. They're more likely to face housing insecurity in retirement, particularly single women who are renting, because they don't have sufficient super to cover both living expenses and rent. Women also live longer on average than men, with Australian life expectancy data showing women live approximately 4 years longer than men. This means their retirement savings need to last longer, yet they start with less. The combination of lower balances and longer life expectancy creates a double disadvantage. A woman retiring at 67 with $180,000 in super might expect to live to 88, which is 21 years of retirement. At a 5% annual drawdown rate, adjusted for investment returns, that balance might provide $9,000 per year in super income, with the rest coming from age pension. A man retiring with $262,000 in super, expecting to live to 84, which is 17 years of retirement, has both a higher starting balance and fewer years to fund. meaning his annual super-derived income could be substantially higher. The gap also affects women differently depending on their relationship status. Married or partnered women often benefit from household sharing of resources, where the combined super of both partners is effectively pooled to fund retirement. But single women, whether never married, divorced, or widowed, face the full impact of the gap individually. They can't rely on a partner's higher super balance to supplement their income. The data shows that single retired women have the highest rates of poverty and financial stress in the retirement population. Indigenous women face even larger super gaps due to lower average workforce participation, lower average earnings, and shorter average life expectancy, meaning less time to accumulate super. Women with disabilities face similar structural disadvantages, often having interrupted workforce participation due to health conditions and facing employment discrimination that results in lower earnings and fewer employment opportunities. What this all accumulates to is a retirement income system that works substantially better for men than for women, not because of explicit gender discrimination in the system's design, but because the system is built around continuous full-time workforce participation and higher earnings, which describes the average male work pattern far more accurately than the average female work pattern. For individual women, understanding these structural factors is important because it shapes realistic retirement planning. If you're a woman in your 30s or 40s who has taken time out for caring responsibilities or is working part-time, understanding that you're likely to retire with less super than male peers isn't about blame or failure. It's about realistic assessment of where you'll be and what strategies might help address the gap. Strategies that can help include making voluntary contributions when financially possible, even small regular amounts, because the compounding effect over time is substantial. Consolidating multiple super accounts to reduce fees, eating into balances, ensuring that when relationships end, superannuation splitting is considered as part of property settlement, taking advantage of government co-contribution schemes if eligible, where the government matches voluntary contributions for lower income earners, salary sacrificing into super when income allows to maximize concessional contributions. But individual strategies can only partially offset structural disadvantages. The $82,000 gap isn't primarily the result of women making different choices about super contributions or investment options. It's the result of systematic differences in earnings and workforce participation that are themselves driven by caring responsibilities, occupational segregation, and persistent pay gaps. Closing the superannuation gender gap meaningfully requires addressing these underlying structural factors, not just encouraging individual women to save more. The recent introduction of super on paid parental leave is a recognition of this structural reality and represents meaningful progress. But it's one policy change addressing one component of a multifaceted problem. The broader super gender gap will persist until there's either fundamental change in how caring work is valued and compensated, or fundamental change in how superannuation is designed to account for interrupted workforce participation, or both. Until then, the $82,000 gap represents a systematic retirement income disadvantage that affects millions of Australian women, translating into lower living standards, greater age pension reliance, and increased financial stress throughout retirement years that are already longer and more financially vulnerable than men's.